Tonight, as Israel's invasion of Rafah targets Hamas terrorists, the International Criminal Court seeks arrest warrants for Hamas and Israeli leaders. The latest from the Middle East. Plus, election 2024.
The threat that Trump poses is greater in his second term than the first.
President Biden takes aim at his rival while attempting to win over black voters. And
when Michael came through and it ripped off 100,000 roofs in an hour or whatever it was, these numbers were insane. We knew we were in big trouble.
5 years after a Category 5 hurricane slammed into Florida's Panhandle, a look at how one church has rebuilt to bring the gospel to their devastated community. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. President Biden slams the International Criminal Court for going after Israeli leaders. Good evening, and thanks for joining us for Faith Nation. In Washington, I'm Caitlin Burke. The outrage expressed by the president echoed in Israel tonight after the ICC's chief prosecutor requested arrest warrants for Hamas and Israeli officials. They include Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. The prosecutor says they're responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Israel and Gaza. This is the first time the United Nations top court has targeted such a close ally of America. Now it's up to pretrial judges to issue the warrants. Today, Israel blasting the decision.
The International Criminal Court in The Hague has proven to the world that it is not legitimate, an institution that is unable to distinguish between the aggressor and the defender, between a democracy that respects human rights and a terrorist organization dedicated to its destruction.
Meanwhile, Iran is observing 5 days of mourning over the death of President Ibrahim Raisi. He was killed along with several others Sunday when their helicopter crashed in the mountains of Iran. The video on your screen shows the president flying in the chopper before it went down. Rescue teams were seen carrying remains from the crash site under thick fog. Today, Iranian leaders calling it a tragic accident. Here now for more, CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell. Chris, any thoughts on what Raisi's death could mean for an already tense Middle East?
Well, Caitlin, I think internally in Iran, we're not going to see much difference in policy. The ultimate policy remains in the hands of the supreme leader. In our report today, we talked about Raisi's policies going to remain in place with the cabinet. But right now, it could shake up the Middle East. I mean, the proxies of Iran, will this shake them up a little bit? It remains to be seen. We also should add that Raisi, he was called the butcher of Tehran for a reason. Slaughtered about 1,500 people in 2019, and back in 1988, he executed thousands of political dissidents. And, Caitlin, we should also remember there's a lot of people that are rejoicing in Iran right now, and some people are calling now for the U.S. to put maximum pressure on the regime and maximum support for the people. And one last thing, Caitlin, there's a powerful underground church in Iran that many people may not be aware of, really supernatural visitations leading many of these Muslims to faith in Jesus.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Shifting now to Israel, there's a lot of internal pressure right now on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What do you make of the ultimatum that Benny Gantz issued, a member of the government's war cabinet, saying that his party will leave unless a plan for after the war is released?
Yeah, he says he's going to leave by June 8th, but the coalition can remain. They have 64 seats. Even if Gantz's party leaves, the coalition will remain. Some people, Caitlin, believe, what Gantz said was being in league with the Biden administration to try to overthrow the government and then include the Palestinian Authority somehow in the day after with the war with Hamas. But likely Gantz is energizing some of the people who want the end of the coalition. But there's also a strong but less vocal part of Israel that really supports Netanyahu and the policies, and especially opposing a two-state solution, a Palestinian state inside Gaza after the war.
The vocal Israeli public is definitely coming out in force right now, and they don't seem happy with Netanyahu. We had thousands gathering at a protest in Tel Aviv over the weekend, demanding he step down and calling for new elections. Is the war losing support overall?
Well, partly, these are many of the same people that opposed the government before the war. They were opposed to the judicial reform. They are large. They are vocal. They're very well funded and supported as well. But they don't tell the whole story. There are the groups. And, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had a group that many of their sons and daughters have died in the war. And what they're asking for is ultimate victory over Hamas. They don't want a two-state solution. And they actually feel like the war is being too restrained by the United States.
Let's talk about those arrest warrants the ICC prosecutor is seeking. If granted, would they actually carry any weight? What would this mean for the Israeli leaders involved?
Well, specifically, Caitlin, Israel's not a party to this treaty with the International Criminal Court. There's 123 nations that are. They would risk arrest in any of those countries, but not nations that are not party to the treaty, like the United States. And some of the reaction, Caitlin, has been, how can you have Sinwar and Israeli leaders, Sinwar meaning the head of Hamas, and Israeli leaders in the same breath? One Israeli leader said this was unforgivable and a terrible political failure. But we'll see how this proceeds after today's announcement.
All right. Chris Mitchell, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is vowing to strengthen his country's relationship with Iran in the wake of Sunday's deadly helicopter crash, calling President Raisi invaluable for bringing the two countries together. It comes at a time Russia's friends are few and far between. More than 2 years into the Russian invasion of Ukraine, today the city of Kharkiv is holding a day of mourning. Sunday, Russian forces shelled a lakeside resort area, killing at least 11 civilians and injuring many more. In a meeting today with 50 defense leaders from around the world, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin highlighted the weekend attack as just one reason the U.S. is working with allies to aid Ukraine.
Putin's new offensive in Kharkiv just underscores the importance of this contact group. Some 50 countries of conscience from around the world are standing up for Ukraine again today. And we're going to continue to get Ukraine the support that it needs. The security assistance that we are now rushing to Ukraine will make a difference in this fight.
Since President Biden signed the $95 billion foreign aid package into law 3 weeks ago, the U.S. has sent Ukraine $1.4 billion in weapons. President Biden is back at the White House after a busy weekend on the campaign trail. Donald Trump, meanwhile, is back in court. With polls showing the two men neck and neck in the presidential race, the rivals are spending their time actively reaching out to their bases. Senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener joins us now with the details. Tara?
Well, Caitlin, with Election Day just 6 months away now, Biden and Trump surprised a lot of people by agreeing to two presidential debates. So between now and then, they're working to shore up support among their key constituents.
Back in the courtroom following a brief stop on the campaign trail, this could be the final week of Donald Trump's hush money trial.
I'm sitting in a very freezing cold courtroom for the last 4 weeks. Is very unfair.
It also means no weekend breaks for either candidate. Speaking to the NAACP in Detroit, as well as historic Morehouse College in Atlanta, Biden sought to engage black college voters, especially with his poll numbers showing a slide in this key demographic. While he touted his record,
there's 3 million more people, African Americans, who have health insurance now because
some turned their backs during his commencement address to protest the war in Gaza.
This is one of the hardest, most complicated problems in the world. There's nothing easy about it.
In Texas, Trump accepted the NRA's endorsement at its annual convention and promised supporters he would continue to protect gun rights.
The NRA is stood with me from the very beginning, and with your vote, I will stand strong for your rights and liberties and 4 more years in the White House.
While Trump's New York trial will sideline him from campaigning again this week, Biden has a full schedule, including a celebration for Jewish American Heritage Month and a trip to New England on Tuesday. Even facing multiple charges, Trump will likely coast to a third Republican nomination, as polls show support as strong as ever among evangelicals and other conservative Christians.
And the first face-off is scheduled for June 27th, making it the earliest general election debate in modern history, and that's to grab those early voters. The second debate is scheduled for September 10th, Caitlin.
Tara, will we have a verdict back in the hush money case ahead of that first debate?
You know, it's really hard to say at this point because the judge indicated today that the case could take longer than expected. We've got closing arguments expected to start next week, but at that rate, the case would not go to the jury's hands until at least after Memorial Day weekend, and deliberations could take several days. So at this point, it's kind of a wait and see, Caitlin.
All right, thanks, Tara. The container ship that took down the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore is officially free from the wreckage. Crews got to work at high tide this morning to refloat the dolly and begin the process of getting the boat back to port. A team of tugboats helped guide the ship that's been tangled up in pieces of the bridge since it crashed, causing the bridge collapse nearly 2 months ago. The dolly is being towed to a nearby marine terminal. That trip expected to last 21 hours altogether. Coming up, the fight for religious freedom around the world. Faith Nation will be back right after this. Welcome back. Senator Marco Rubio is calling on President Biden to fill an open religious freedom job in his administration. The special advisor on international religious freedom within the National Security Council was a role created by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. That job is currently vacant. Senator Rubio wants to change that, penning a letter to the president reading, quote, appointing a qualified and experienced special advisor on international religious freedom within the National Security Council is critical not only to underscore our nation's dedication to this fundamental human right, but also to enhance our national security by helping to address one of the main causes of conflict and instability. He adds, by prioritizing this position, we not only demonstrate our nation's unwavering commitment to protecting religious freedom for all, regardless of faith. Former Missouri Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler was recently appointed to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, and she joins us now with more. Congresswoman, let's start with that unwavering commitment Senator Rubio mentions. What role does the U.S. play in fighting for religious freedom around the world?
Well, it plays a very, very big role. We are the city on the hill, the strongest country in the world in many ways, economically and militarily, but certainly as being a beacon of hope and light for religious freedom. And other people all over the world look to America for our leadership and to be an advocate for religious freedom. They long for that freedom in their own country. And sadly, many, many people do not experience that. And so we have both an obligation and the privilege of advocating for religious freedom around the world. It should be part of our diplomatic efforts. It's good for us as a country to have relations with countries that embrace religious freedom, and it's good for people all over the world. You look at the countries that embrace religious freedom, they tend to be more prosperous. There is less violence. The ones that don't, the people suffer. It's more violent and they're poor economically, and there is no security. So it behooves us to stand up for this religious right, and it is a human right all over the world.
Now, Speaker Mike Johnson appointed you to this role last week. Congratulations. Coming in with a fresh set of eyes, what areas are the most concerning for you when it comes to religious freedom?
Sure. Well, I've been a member of Congress, as you know, for 12 years, served on the Armed Services Committee, and had an opportunity to travel to many places around the country. And as a Christian also, I've been following what is going on, and I'm very concerned, certainly for China. They're a huge violator of human rights. The Christian pastors in prison. They are committing genocide against the Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang province. And this is going on for years. But we have other areas as well. In fact, Nigeria, many people don't think of Nigeria, but 80% of the Christians who were killed last year are from Nigeria. In fact, since 2009, there's been over 52,000 Christians slaughtered in that country, over 5,000 slaughtered just in 2022. And Nigeria is Africa's most populous and most economically strong country in Africa. And they're a major partner with the United States. So we have an opportunity to use our influence there to push back and to force them to stop the groups that are committing this horrific genocide of Christians there in Nigeria. But also, you know, Russia has gone into Ukraine. We're getting reports of Christians and Ukrainian pastors that are being imprisoned in the areas that Russia has overtaken, and they're being tortured. But then you have Sudan and many, many other countries. And so the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, which I was appointed to, our job and role is to monitor and assess the religious freedom violations around the world, and to unflinchingly fight for and support and bring out into the open what these are. And we recommend to Congress, to the Secretary of State, to the President, specific policy recommendations also that we think would be helpful in this area. And we stand as a voice for those who have no voice.
All right. Well, I guess just a one-word answer. Do you think that the Biden administration is doing enough to address these concerns around the world? And unfortunately, we've got to wrap up here in a minute.
No, he's not. There's a lot more he could do.
All right. Former Missouri Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
A testimony of perseverance, how one Florida church rebuilt after a hurricane demolished their building. Severe weather is wreaking havoc in the center of the country, with millions of Americans currently under advisories. It comes after multiple tornadoes swept across the plains yesterday, touching down in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Colorado. The twisters blew apart homes, toppled trees, and mangled power lines. In Houston, crews are working to clear debris left by last week's deadly storms. There, most residents have had their power restored.
The next few weeks are going to be hard for some folks in our community. They're going to be uncomfortable, but we've been through this.
Meteorologists predict the weather will intensify today and tomorrow, bringing thunderstorms to the Great Lakes region before sweeping across Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas City, and Oklahoma City tonight. 5 years ago, Hurricane Michael devastated Florida's Panhandle, the Category 5 storm destroying everything in its path, including Panama City's Lighthouse Church. Today, the church stands as a testament to perseverance. CBN's Brody Carter brings us this story of faith in action.
The scars from Hurricane Michael, a Category 5 hurricane, are still seen here in Panama City Beach, Florida, even 5 years later. Here are the remains of the original Lighthouse Church building. Now, just a concrete slab that once supported a growing congregation.
And when you're in Florida, if it's a 3, you don't worry about a 3. But when it went to a 5, I said, okay. So we packed everybody up and we evacuated.
The first Category 5 storm to strike Florida's Panhandle. Michael became the most powerful hurricane to make landfall in the U.S. It claimed 59 lives and caused an estimated $25 billion in damage.
Sadly, I have to go get a demolition permit to take down the remainder of the building.
Pastor Cole Bailey leads Lighthouse Church. It used to be located in Panama City Beach. That is, before the storm caved in its roof.
This is one classroom. This will be the
East Side classroom.
I've never been through anything like that in my life. There was no comparison. When Michael came through and it ripped off 100,000 roofs in an hour or whatever it was, these numbers were insane. We knew we were in big trouble.
After 24 years of serving this community, Hurricane Michael took everything except the ground it stood on. Its foundation in faith, however, remained unshaken.
Just days after the storm hit, and we're all still just in shock, I get a call from someone from Operation Blessing.
That led to a partnership which mobilized volunteers bringing chainsaws, hot meals, and a spirit of perseverance. Pastor Bailey saw it as the power of faith in action.
They came in with resources that blew our minds. They came in with hundreds of volunteers. Just at one location, we were able to serve 38,000 hot meals after that storm. One location. We lost count at our other location at 20,000 meals. Resources are coming in. Equipment is coming in.
Stephanie Robinson has been part of Lighthouse since it started in 2000.
I knew God was going to move, but it's hard to see in that, that devastating time of just everything that God had kind of built just plummeting. And but it was amazing to watch the community and family of God just immediately step in.
Despite the storm, Stephanie says the church found its true strength in the faith of its people.
If the Lord didn't save you from it, He's gonna bring you through it.
Today, the new building stands in a renovated movie theater across the bridge in Panama City.
And it is a beautiful picture of God taking the destruction and bringing something out of the ashes, really and truly, and just exploding here.
But this church, right here, is so thankful for when Operation Blessing landed on our property. It helped us through the hardest time of our lives. I cannot express to you how life-changing and how powerful that ministry is.
The story of Lighthouse Church is a bright example of how a church body can suffer well, believing that God can and will use the storms in this life for His glory, if we allow Him to. Reporting in Panama City, Brody Carter, CBN News.
Coming up, saying so long to Virginia's longest traffic light. We explain next. Finally tonight, drivers in Fairfax County, Virginia are saying goodbye to the longest traffic light in the Commonwealth, and it couldn't come a minute sooner. The infamous Pope's Head Road stoplight lasts nearly 5.5 minutes during rush hour, backing up morning and evening traffic for miles. Finally, after decades of complaints, that's going to change. Construction crews are reconfiguring the busy intersection to include roundabouts and flyover bridges, signaling the end of the lengthy light in 2025. And that's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight. We will see you tomorrow.